All right, welcome everyone to this week's Xojo webinar. I'm Paul Lefevre, the Xojo Developer Evangelist. This week's webinar probably be a little shorter than usual, unless you guys have tons of questions, but we're going to be talking about and taking a look at Xojo Cloud databases. And because this is actually such an easy thing to use, it's not really a lot to talk about, but we're going to go through some slides here and then look at how we can connect up to stuff and look at some Xojo code. Again, if you have questions, feel free to ask them while I'm talking, and I'll take a look at the question window during little gaps and whatnot. All right, so you may have heard of Xojo Cloud. This is our hosting service for Xojo-made web applications. It allows one-click deployment of your web apps. You just click the deploy button in your toolbar. It has top-notch security. You can control the firewall within your Xojo apps that are running on Xojo Cloud. It has support for SFTP, SSL, and there are multiple data center locations in Chicago, London, Hong Kong, and Sydney. So kind of spread out all over the world. Now, up until recently, the only way to really use databases on the cloud, on Xojo Cloud, was to use SQLite. You could just have your SQLite database file sitting up on the Xojo Cloud server right alongside your app, and your web app would essentially function as a little web server that's communicating with the SQLite app. And this can work pretty well for a pretty wide variety of apps, but sometimes you really need an actual database server. And that's the link if you want to play with the Eddie's Electronics app on that's running on Xojo Cloud. But last month in February, with medium and large plans, we added the ability to connect to Postgres and MySQL. And I shouldn't say connect. We added the ability to actually run Postgres and MySQL on your Xojo Cloud server. In the past, if you wanted to connect to some other database server, you had to host it elsewhere and then open up firewall ports so that your Xojo web app running on Xojo Cloud could communicate with the database server. But now all of this is running right on the server, so it's all nicely connected. Security is a lot tighter because of that, and all kinds of other good stuff. Also a lot easier to work with. And in addition to the two databases, there's now the ability to create an SSH tunnel so that you can easily connect to the databases from elsewhere. And usually that's your development machine. These are the pricing and packages for Xojo Cloud that you can see here. They range in small to large with increases in storage and performance and all that stuff. And again, the database and tunneling capabilities are only on the medium and large server options. And this is primarily because those database servers do require the extra RAM and primarily the RAM, I imagine. So today we're going to look just at Postgres. MySQL works primarily the same. I'm just more familiar with Postgres, so we'll just work with that. But you're not really going to notice any different if you prefer to work with MySQL. And to use Postgres on a Xojo Cloud server, you simply click a button that has this label on it, Enable PGSQL. And this is going to generate a username and password for you. This will just pop right up in your web browser, and you can just copy and paste to save that somewhere so you have easy access to it. There's also another button called Enable Tunnel that you can just click. And you can enable the tunnel if you want to access your database from your actual computer. And this uses SSH, so it's nice and secure. And this is if you want to, if you have a database admin tool, and you want to be able to connect to the database that's up on Xojo Cloud, you can enable the tunnel, and then the tool can connect through the tunnel to the database on the cloud. Clicking this button also generates a username and password for the tunnel, which you're going to need when you're working with it. And in case you've never seen Xojo Cloud, the control panel is very simple. It just looks like this. So when you log into your account at Xojo.com, after you've purchased a Xojo Cloud, on the right-hand side is a link under the Xojo Cloud heading that says Control Panel. And when you click that, you get the Control Panel with these options. And you can see here the Enable My SQL, PostgreSQL, and Tunnel options are new. Those are the last 3 buttons. And right now I have Postgres and the tunnel enabled, so the button has changed to disable so that you can turn those on and off as you want. So if you want to use database admin tools to work with your database, you're going to need to use the tunnel. And this is going to connect using SSH, using the SSH username and password that was given to you by Xojo Cloud when you enabled the tunnel. And you're also going to need the database username and password that was given to you by Xojo Cloud when you enabled the tunnel. And it works with pretty much any tool. We're going to take a look here after we go through these slides of at least, we'll look at 3 tools. We're going to look at Toad, Navicat, and pgadmin. And these are 3 different DB admin tools that work with Postgres. There probably are a whole number of other ones, but these are the 3 that I happen to have and have used, so I know how to work with. Toad is a free tool. I believe it's on the Mac App Store, and there's also a Windows version. I actually remember Toad from many, many years ago working when it was a Windows app that worked only with Oracle databases, but apparently now it also works with Oracle, MySQL, and Postgres. Navicat also has a variety of DB admin tools and also a very wide ranges of pricing that work with Oracle, MySQL, Postgres, and probably lots of other databases as well. And pgadmin is pretty much, it's the default admin tool that comes with a Postgres installation. It's free. You can also probably grab it separately from the Postgres site. It's not the greatest tool in the world, but hey, it's free, and some people might be familiar with it. So in a few minutes, we'll take a look at these and see how we can connect to a Postgres database on Xojo Cloud using the tunnel. Now, of course, your Xojo apps want to be able to connect to these databases that are now running on Xojo Cloud. And when you deploy your web app to Xojo Cloud, you don't need a tunnel or anything because the database is sitting right there on the server alongside your web app. So technically, the location of the database is actually localhost because the web app is running on the same server that the database server is. So it's localhost. So when you're configuring stuff in Xojo, you're just going to put in localhost, just as if you had Postgres installed on your development machine. And that's a simple app we're going to look at in a moment that's going to connect to a table we have in a Postgres database. You can also connect to the remote database while debugging, which is handy so that you can actually run and test your apps in the debugger, but still be connecting to the remote database. And to do this, you have to, again, go back to the tunnel and you have to enable it. But you can enable it right from the terminal so that essentially your whole computer now has access via the tunnel to the database. And there's a simple command for that. And we'll go through this, but you just punch that in the terminal and enter the password. And of course, you replace the IP with your Xojo Cloud IP. And I want to call out the great blog post that Greg wrote earlier this week, coincidentally or not, depending on how you think we plan these things. And he summarizes a lot of what I'm covering here that you can actually watch me do. And if you just need a quick reference, you can refer to this blog post. He's got some steps and some code in there. All right, so that's the end of these slides. So now we can jump in and take a look at some actual stuff. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do here, let's get that out of the way. I'm going to start up a DB admin tool, and we'll start with pgadmin. All right, so if you've ever used this before, you'll recognize that it's not exactly the prettiest thing in the world, but it's functional. So this here is the connect button. And here I can fill out the information to connect. So I could put in a name here of Xojo Cloud. And remember, the host is localhost because we're going to be connecting through a tunnel. Username that Xojo Cloud gave me was DB admin, and I'm going to cut and paste my long password it spit at me in here. And then we can go to the SSH tunnel tab and turn on tunneling. It'll tell us it's not going to save passwords in that case. And here I can type in the IP address of the Xojo Cloud server. And my cloud tunnel login here is also DB admin with the password. And I can click the button and it connects, and doesn't look like much has changed here, but now the server groups I can expand and I can see here that Xojo Cloud is now connected. And then I can start expanding this large tree to find what it is I'm working on. I have simply created a little table in the Postgres database, and eventually I can navigate to it. So you can see it down here. Yeah, here it is, team. My ever famous little rinky-dink team table that I use for simple examples. And this couldn't possibly be any simpler. It's a 3-column table with a primary key and 2 varchar columns for text. And you can see how pgadmin, lets you view this stuff in a grid. It probably would let me add new rows. I think I actually created and entered the data. I think I used Toad for this. But like I said, any of these tools are all going to show the same thing, and they're just different ways to work with it. And you can see, with any of these tools, the specifics of SQL and all kinds of data types and whatnot. I've already done a Postgres webinar, probably about a year ago, and that stuff will all apply because this is just a regular installation of Postgres. So I'm not going to rehash that, but you can see how we're now connected to the database that's on Xojo Cloud. And so I could configure it now the way I want. I could, add the tables I want with columns. I could load in data, do all the database setup before so that my Xojo app will be able to use it. And, a common thing you might do is, have a database that's set up just for development and then a production one. And then when you're running locally, connect to the development database. And then only when you're deployed do you connect to the production database, that sort of stuff. But that's all typical database administration and structure that you can work through or do however you want. But this is how it works with pgadmin. And you'll see the process is going to be very, very similar with other tools. This one here is Toad. Splash screen is on my other screen, so you don't see it, but here's Toad. This, again, looks similar to other database tools. And you can see here, same sort of stuff, it's just in different places. So again, we're connecting to Postgres. This tool can connect to Oracle or MySQL. So the host is localhost. My sample stuff is in the Postgres database. My user, though, is DB admin, and I'm going to grab that password again. And then I still have to go to the SSH and turn on the tunnel. Put in the tunnel password. And the IP of the cloud. All right, and this has connected. This is a little different here. You can still see various things. Might be a little cleaner to work with. So you can see the columns that are on here. Click here, I can see the data that's in here. So this is also a free tool. I got this one from the Mac App Store, and I like it better than PG Admin. It's still not fabulous, but it does have a lot of features in here, and it's pretty neat to play with. And like I said, it connects right up to the stuff on the server, so you can configure and do all your database administration nice and easily here without having to use some crazy web app or any other custom things. It's just any tool you already happen to be comfortable with will just connect and you can use. So this is Toad. All right, next we'll look at Navicat, and this is actually Navicat Lite. This one probably has the nicest UI out of all of them. And again, the same techniques, they all have this prompt here. You don't really usually have to even do much digging around to find things. It's usually right there in obvious spots, so you can find it and enter the information. Oops, I guess I didn't put in the right thing somewhere. So the question is, enter password, but which one does it want? Let's try the server password. Nope, it wanted the SSH password. All right, so we've got, again, the two databases that are on here. And, I have to double click on things to get it to essentially load. That's probably a performance type of thing, so it's not pulling down everything needlessly. But then eventually it finds my little team table and get that toolbar in the way. There we go. And Navicat opens this stuff up in a separate window, but still, shows you all the data that can be edited and whatnot. So like I said, out of all of them, Navicat seems to have probably the slickest UI. And I've had this light version for a while. I don't really know if I actually purchased it or if it was free or anything like that. Like I said, they do have a variety of versions in the Mac App Store and for Windows as well. All right, so that's how you would use a database admin tool with your Xojo Cloud database. Again, pretty simple. Just choose the one that you happen to already be comfortable with, and you're probably good to go. And now working with Xojo. This is also going to be very easy. So what I have here is a pre-built, very simple web app that is just going to take the data that's in that team table and display it in a list box here. And remember, there's only 2 rows, nothing super sophisticated here. This is just to show the techniques. And so all this does here is does a select from the table. And again, this is all standard SQL. It won't really have changed just because your database server is on Xojo Cloud. None of that has to change. That code all remains the same. So we select from the table, and then we just loop through and add the rows to the list box and catch any errors that may happen. And then when the web app starts, we're actually doing the initial database connection. And this is just like any other database connection to Postgres or any other database for that matter. I mentioned earlier that I'm showing Postgres right now. MySQL is largely the same as all this. You use the MySQL database class instead of the Postgres one, but you're still going to provide the same information. MySQL uses a different port than Postgres, but other than that, largely all the same. So here you're going to specify the create a new database, set the username and password for the database, The host, remember, is always localhost because this stuff is running on the server, the Xojo Cloud server. And our table is in the Postgres database, so we set that. And then if we're able to connect, I set this variable called connected is true, and if we can't connect, I set it to false. And the reason is if we can't connect, I'm going to throw up an error page. So when the session starts, it checks if the database is actually connected. And if it is, it's going to let the main page load and display the data in the table. And if it's not connected, it's going to throw up an error page. Now, if I tried to run this right now, just in debug mode, it's going to run and it's going to attempt to launch and it's going to bring up the error page and it's going to show some error messages, which essentially are saying, well, I didn't find any PostgreSQL here on localhost, which it wouldn't. I don't have Postgres running right now on this account or on this computer. So there's nothing to connect to. So it couldn't connect to the one on Xojo Cloud because it doesn't know about it. And we didn't tell it anything. So this is always why it's good to have error stuff like this, so you can kind of catch things like this and remind yourself. So the appropriate way to the way that this will work is to actually deploy this to Xojo Cloud itself. And I'm just going to move this here so I can see the deploy button. So right here, when you have Xojo Cloud configured in the Xojo Cloud setting here, and this is all just connected through your Xojo login. So once you've purchased a Xojo Cloud and you're logged into the Xojo IDE, it all pulls all this information down and it's all set up and whatnot. And you can just click the deploy button. And then it'll do the usual build process or whatnot and communicate with Xojo Cloud and then begin the process of uploading the built app up to Xojo Cloud. And this one will take, it takes about a minute. And while this is uploading, I'm just going to take a quick peek at any questions. There's a question from Edwin noting he was stuck in traffic and asking when this webinar will show up on YouTube. Yeah, all the webinars show up on YouTube, usually probably the day after or 2 days after. Depends when I get around to getting them converted and going through the upload process. But yeah, this will be on YouTube this week. So this is going to upload it to Xojo Cloud, and then when it's done, it's going to just launch the web app in the browser. Now, obviously, this is not something you're going to want to do every time you want to test, but I'm just going to show you this first, and then afterwards, we'll see how you can actually run in debug mode using the tunnel, and but still connect to the database that's on Xojo Cloud. And you can see this web app now launched and loaded up our 2 rows that are in the table that is sitting in the Postgres server on Xojo Cloud. Now, that's all well and good, great for deployment purposes. It's very handy to be able to deploy like that without having to collect anything or configure anything on the server. But not everyone tends to write 100% working code on their first try that's ready to deploy. Most of us need to actually test and debug. So we tried running and that didn't work. So how can we run but still connect to our data that's on the database server? Well, as I mentioned in one of the slide shots there, you can run a terminal command to enable the tunnel essentially on your computer so that it will be able to access the database that's on Xojo Cloud. So let's see here, I got terminal. This is the terminal command. And this is noted in Greg's blog post as well. So I'll just run this here. This will prompt me for the tunnel password. And then there's actually another option, I think -V, that you can add to the end here that'll spit out all kinds of verbose data about things. Apparently here it doesn't tell you anything as to whether it, I guess if it didn't work, it would come back with an error, but apparently it did work, I guess, but we'll see. So we can go back to Xojo now, and I can just run. And the web app now runs and it was able to connect to the Postgres database on Xojo Cloud and load the data in and populate the list box. So now I can do all my local testing. Now, the one other thing I kind of mentioned that you probably would want to consider here is when you are doing your testing, you're probably not going to want to be connecting to the same database. So when you're structuring stuff, you're probably going to want to do something like if debug build, then the database name is, dev, and then otherwise it's production, something like that. There's nothing worse than accidentally running development stuff, and then you accidentally are running against a production database and you modify data you shouldn't have modified. That's really bad. So it's always good to have something like this in place so that you can make sure you're connected to where you ought to be. But other than that, it doesn't change how you would have already have worked with Postgres if you used it for anything else, except that now you don't have to worry about installing it on your server, figuring out how to configure it, going through all the security stuff to figure out how to lock it down, or any of that. You just click a little button on your Xojo Cloud control panel. All right, I got a few questions here, so let me just scan these. All right, Juiced is asking if the deploy option here uploads all the files which are already on the cloud. Yeah, it's going to package up your entire build and upload it to the cloud. So that will include building the app, any images or stuff that's associated with that. Anything you have in copy file build steps will get processed and packaged, and it'll all get uploaded to the cloud. All right, and Edwin apparently is just repeating that it's probably a good idea to make sure, again, that you're always connected to the right database, because he's probably speaking from experience. I probably am as well, but people will sometimes forget which database they're connected to. So having it nice and hard coded so there's no option or chance to mess anything up is always a good idea. All right. Well, like I said, it's going to be a little shorter of a webinar. I don't really have anything else to cover specifically. It's kind of one of the nice things about Xojo Cloud being that it is so darn easy to use. I don't have to show a lot of complicated stuff about how to configure or set things up. It's usually a click here, click there, and everything just kind of works, which is really nice. So like I've mentioned a couple times, if you prefer to use MySQL instead of Postgres, none of what I showed here is really drastically different. You probably use a different port number and a different class for MySQL instead of PostgreSQL database. But other than that, everything's going to work the same. Everything that you're familiar with MySQL will continue to work the same, and whatever DB admin tools you use with MySQL will work the same through the tunnel. And Edwin is also asking, mentioning another tip, which it sounds like it's related to working with databases here between dev and prod, is he says he exports everything to the local machine, like the SQL, and then sets up a local copy, and then physically connects to a local copy rather than even attempting to connect to the one on the server. And that you can certainly go that route as well. Whatever works for how you need to work. If you have experience setting up Postgres and want to have that set up locally, I bet you could probably just do a nice SQL dump and then run that right against there and get an exact copy of everything to work with locally. And then you have pretty much no risk and probably a little bit better performance because you're not going over the internet when communicating with the database. And that's the fun thing about working with databases. There's a million ways to do everything. And I wouldn't say there's any particular one right way, but it's there's lots of ways to do everything, and everyone has their favorite way. And whatever works for you, just don't change production data. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions. And like I said, I don't have anything else to cover this week. This is nearing the end of March. And I want to remind everyone that that means you just have about a month to make sure you're registered for the XDC 2015 conference in Austin, where there will be people talking about databases and lots of people that have lots of experience using databases in lots of different ways. And it's always great to meet up with those people and talk with them about how they do stuff and how it might be different than how you do stuff, and share tips and techniques and that sort of thing. So do make sure you sign up. And if you are thinking about going but haven't signed up yet, you want to make sure that you reserve your room before the end of March, because that's when the room block expires. And then it's possible you may not be able to have a reserved room in the hotel if it's filling up for other reasons. And I'm not sure about the rate. The rate may change as well. So don't wait too long on that. It's only another week, I guess, until the end of March. And before I sign off, Edwin is asking if I explained a lot about Postgres before he arrived, and to remind everyone, no, I didn't explain anything specific about Postgres in this webinar, but I did do a webinar about a year ago that you can find on the YouTube channel that covered Postgres in much more detail. So you can kind of view that as a companion to this one. And we'll see about when we get this one uploaded, if there's some way on YouTube to kind of link the two, so that it's easy for you to refer to them. All right, well, that covers everything. Since I didn't take up a large part of your day, you'll now be able to get tons of database work done. Thanks, everyone, for attending. Have a great day.